Metz from the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences, where I lead the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which provides seed funding to entrepreneurial small businesses to develop game-changing education technologies. Welcome to the 8th annual Ed Games Expo, a week-long showcase of EdTech innovations developed with the support across more than 30 programs in the federal government. As part of this year's expo, 5 of the country's leading education technology developers have produced a How the Learning Game Was Made video to share the story of the steps and roles it takes to create a great learning game. We hope these events inform and inspire students to think about the roles they would like to play and to connect their experiences to their classroom learning and future careers that they could one day play. Today's How the Learning Game Was Made video features Voices for Suffrage, which was developed with the support of the Congress Civic Participation and Primary Sources Program at the Library of Congress. Second Avenue Learning is an award-winning educational software research and development company. The Voices for Suffrage game, They Persisted, challenges players to replay history by choosing different actions influenced by primary sources to guide their chosen suffrage party to victory. After the video ends, stay tuned for an engaging Q&A that I will moderate with the Second Avenue Learning team and a group of high school students who watched the video. Now, off to the Second Avenue team in Rochester, New York, to learn about how the Voices for Suffrage game was made.
Voices for Suffrage brings the suffrage struggle to life through hundreds of primary sources from the Library of Congress and research libraries, making the 70-year journey accessible and embedding students in the front lines of a historical political movement that created a blueprint for future civil rights movements. In They Persisted, players are immersed in the women's suffrage movement by allying with important groups and leaders. In a series of interactive games, players join a women's suffrage party to navigate through tough decisions needed to grow the movement, persuade politicians and anti-suffragists, and ultimately achieve the vote.
Hello, I'm Stephen Wesson from the Library of Congress, and I'm delighted to help tell the story of how Voices for Suffrage was made. Voices for Suffrage had its beginnings in a program managed by the Library of Congress called the Congress Civic Participation and Primary Sources Projects. It was established to support the development of engaging web and mobile-based applications on the subject of Congress and civic participation for K-12 students. The library received proposals from a number of organizations, and we selected the most promising ones to provide grant support for, including Second Avenue Learning's Voices for Suffrage. We greatly enjoyed working with the creative and innovative team at Second Avenue Learning over the past several months and years, and now are excited to see what happens now that this project is in the hands of the most important people, students and teachers.
I'm Tori Van Voorhis. I'm the founder and CEO of Second Avenue Learning. Thank you for taking time today to learn about how our game was made. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about each of the people that you're going to meet today. First up is Professor Jacobs. He works at the Rochester Institute of Technology, was one of the founders of the first game program there, and is a great resource for open source software development. The next person on my team you're going to meet is Talis, and she had a job this time of helping to shape the narrative and find all of the content for this game, which was really challenging, and she had to make primary sources come to life in an interesting way for students. Next up is Brian, and Brian works with our classrooms and our students to test to make sure that our games are fun, and so you'll get to see how we tested early with what's called a paper prototype. Then you're going to meet Susan, our creative director, who helps to design products that are beautiful and easy to use. And in this particular case, she needed to design a user interface that would evoke the history of the suffrage movement. And then you're going to meet Ian, who's a software designer. and he's going to talk to you about all the different layers of technology that it takes to make a game. Lastly, you're going to meet Sven. Sven's job on this project had two purposes. One was around quality assurance and to make sure that it would work for all sorts of different learners, because it's really important that what we design for schools works for everyone. I hope you enjoy the tour.
A game designer's job is to figure out what the game is, how it will be played, the goals for the game, the win conditions for the game, the rules, and the mechanics. The mechanics are the repeatable pieces of play that you do over and over again in the game. So in a Mario game, Mario's main mechanic is that he runs and jumps. For Voices of Suffrage, we had some defined mechanics and we had a bunch of constraints. Constraints are good because as a designer, if you've got a blank slate, you've got too many choices. If you have some constraints, it helps move you down the path that the game should be. So, Voices of Suffrage had to be an educational game that couldn't change history. So we can't change what happened. We have to be able to work with the character and change the character's path through the game. We were given a mechanic, which was primary source analysis, which, by that name, doesn't sound like it's an exciting or fun thing, but if you think of it as the things you do as a detective in a game or in a story or in a puzzle game to solve problems, that's a big piece of gameplay. So the Second Avenue team assembled a group of different experts who knew different parts of education or the history or game design, and they went through some choices with me on what we could do. Once we picked a goal, once we picked a mechanic, once we picked how that would work, it was their job to go and create a paper prototype. So we went through a couple of different versions or iterations of the tabletop game, and then we came to what you play in Voices of Suffrage today.
Hi, I'm Talis, and I'm the content manager for the Voices for Suffrage application. Now, the suffrage movement spanned over 70 years and 3 generations of women from all across the United States. So the first question I had to answer when curating content for the game was, which piece of the story do we want to tell? For the first chapter of They Persisted, we decided to start with the time period of 1917 to 1920 because a lot happened during that short time. From that point forward, it was just breaking down the events from that time period into smaller and smaller pieces. So I next broke down the major events and tactics into what we called arenas for action, and then I broke those arenas down into specific actions that the players could take based on real-life historical events. The most difficult, but also the most interesting part was finding sources. The really fun thing about managing content is that you're in charge of cultivating an experience for the player. You get to manage what they're seeing and what they're learning, which is really powerful, but also something you have to be careful with. Especially when you're just showing bits and pieces of history like we are in this game, you have to make sure that you're representing the history as accurately as possible, and that you've done your research and really understand the whole story, so it makes sense when you're pulling out just the bits and pieces you want to cover. So for a project like this, and when working with primary sources in general, it's really important to get an understanding of the whole picture by looking at a wide variety of primary sources from different perspectives, and also looking at some reputable secondary sources, such as books, articles, and talks by historians.
Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm the game producer on Voices for Suffrage. When you're making a game, it's important to know early on if the game is fun to play. In order to do that, you need people to play the game and tell you what they liked and what they didn't like. That's called play testing. But how do you get people to play your game when you're still in the process of making it? You do something called paper playtesting. Paper playtesting is a way to tell if people will enjoy your game before you actually start building it. You create a basic version of your game idea using paper, dice, playing cards, and other physical objects, and you have people play it while you watch them. Afterwards, you can ask them questions about their experience, and you use that information to make changes to your game design. We used paper playtesting when working on They Persisted, which is a game about making choices based on information you're given. We created simple versions of in-game screens on paper, wrote down instructions, and explained to our testers that they should imagine playing this experience on a computer. Our team would observe the session and ask the participants questions about the experience after it was over. We would then talk about what we learned from the testers and decided on what changes we could make to improve the experience. One of the bigger changes that came out of paper playtesting involved the consult your leader ability. After a few playtesting sessions, we noticed that many players were disappointed to learn that they would lose a turn if they consulted their leader. When we asked them why, the most common response was that since the leaders were both well-known suffragists, players really wanted to interact with them, and they felt that the penalty discouraged them from doing so. So, after discussing with the rest of the team, we made the decision to remove the penalty completely, but limit the amount of times that a player was able to use that ability in a single game.
When all of that planning you just learned about nears an end, visual design begins. In my role as creative director at Second Avenue Learning, I get the honor and the joy of bringing those ideas to life and creating what you ultimately see and interact with on screen. To begin thinking about the look and feel for They Persisted, we asked ourselves two big questions. One, what is the world or the time period we want a user to feel immersed in? And two, what is the age range of our target audience? With those questions settled, we can embark on the design of all the elements we need for the user interface, or what you might know as the UI, and the contents of the game. At every step and every turn of the design process, we continue to ask and answer several other questions. 1, is it engaging? 2, is it inclusive? 3, is it usable? And 4, especially in the case of They Persisted, is it educational? If we hit the mark on all of those questions, we've probably produced a game that you want to play over and over and that we would consider a success.
Now it's time to start development. Hi, I'm Ian, the software developer for Voices for Suffrage. When planning out an app like Voices for Suffrage, you need to start by breaking it down into more manageable chunks. You have the backend, which are all the pieces working in the background, such as the server, which holds all the files for the website, the database, which stores all the content, and the routes that help the user interact with the application. We also have a content management tool where we enter in and store all the primary sources and event entries. This tool makes it easier for the content development team to write and edit content, and we are also creating a public-facing tool so that anyone can enter primary sources. Then, you have the front end, which are all the pieces a user can see while using the app. To build the front end, you start with the systems that appear throughout the app, like the primary sources and entries viewer, which is the heart of Voices for Suffrage. Next, you tackle the navigation, which allows a user to navigate between the different screens and sections of the app. Finally, feature by feature, you dive in and flesh out the specifics, whether it's the interactive map and timeline, the various videos and activities in the guided tours, or the thought-provoking gameplay of They Persisted. Once you start on an individual feature, you'll sometimes find that the process starts over again, as you consider what needs to be made in what order to bring this individual section to life.
And the last step in the pipeline is QA. My name is Sven Rummel, and I'm the lead QA on Voices for Suffrage. So, what is QA? Well, QA stands for Quality Assurance. In a nutshell, it's making sure that a project like Voices for Suffrage functions and is up to your company's quality standards. Now, how do you actually do QA on a project like Voices for Suffrage? Well, in the case of Voices for Suffrage, we make certain it functions on all combinations of browsers, tablets, operating systems, such as Android, iPhone, Mac, Windows, Chrome, Firefox. It can be like 20 or 30 combinations. You do this by trying to break it. You deliberately try and make the app fail in as many ways as you can. So, we've made sure it functions. What's next? Well, now we have to make sure the quality is good. We want to do this by looking at your company standards and the students' needs to make sure that everything is up to a nice high quality. The last part on this is one that's near and dear to my heart, is accessibility. That means basically we have to make sure that the application functions for everybody. It has to be usable by the entire world regardless of physical ability, whether they have a hard time seeing, hard time typing, moving a mouse, or anything else. It doesn't matter. There has to be some way to use the app. And that's deeply important to make sure that everybody on the web has a pleasant experience. That's QA in a nutshell. So if you're a detail-oriented person and like finding bugs in games, this would be something you could do.
Our current task is collecting feedback from teachers and students to improve their experience with Voices for Suffrage. We're also creating a public-facing authoring tool so anyone can enter events and primary sources. We hope to be able to add more content and more game chapters to continue telling and teaching the stories of the women involved in the suffrage movement. The application is called Voices for Suffrage because the people are really who made the movement so incredible. These women, who in 1848 had no experience organizing political events and had very little rights, were hosting national conventions, organizing political groups, and challenging sexist views that had existed for centuries. There are also stories from women of color who aren't talked about as frequently. Women like Ida B. Wells Barnett, a former slave who proudly led a group of black women in the 1913 Washington, D.C. parade after being told she had to walk in the back. Or Mary Church Terrell, who picketed outside President Wilson's White House and won an anti-discrimination lawsuit at the age of 87. The women of the Native American Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose wisdom and tribal leadership inspired early suffragists in their fight for women's rights. These are the voices who made the suffrage movement so incredible and launched a national movement for women's rights that is still going on today.
Alright, that was everyone. It's an amazing group of people, and it really takes teamwork to make serious games. And we're so thankful that we were able to do this. In spite of a very complicated COVID year, we've had thousands of classrooms across America get to play Voices for Suffrage and the game They Persisted. We look forward to getting materials from you, and I hope you enjoy Voices for Suffrage.
Hello, and welcome to the How the Learning Game Was Made question and answer session with the developer of Voices for Suffrage, Second Avenue Learning, and a group of high school students from Rochester, New York. Wow, Second Avenue team, what a great video. It's so great to see you guys. So to start out here, I'm gonna give a very brief introduction to our 5 team members from the Second Avenue Learning team. And then we're gonna say hello to our students, do some Q&A, and that's what we're doing. We just watched the video, it was awesome. Sven Rummel is an 11-year veteran of the ed tech industry with a focus on accessibility and making sure that educational software is universally accessible. Ian Situich is a software developer with 7 years experience. In this project, he put together all the pieces to create the stuff you see and don't see. Susan Colodny is the creative director at Second Avenue Learning. She counts the design of Voices for Suffrage as one of her most meaningful and personally fulfilling projects. Talis Polashensky is the content manager for this project, in charge of researching, writing, and adding content. And lastly, Victoria Tori Van Voris is a former educator and founder of CEO of Second Avenue Learning. As someone who grew up and lives in Rochester, surrounded by women's history, Voices for Suffrage is a real passion project for her, and she is thrilled to get the project into the classrooms. And I'll just start by saying I've known Tori for 15 years as the CEO of this very impressive education technology development company. So great to see where we came from 15 years ago to today with a socially significant education learning game. Hello, Tori.
Hello, Ed. It's awesome to see you, and thank you for the great introduction of the team. It's been a pleasure to work with you for this many years, and we can pretend it wasn't 15.
Yeah, well stated. Now on to our students who just watched the video, and we would love to engage in a rich Q&A with you guys asking the questions and our experts trying to answer the questions. Off to you guys.
I got a question. How long did it take to develop the game?
I'll take that. It took us about a year to build the game. So in the first phase, we had to design it and do some research, and then we put together design documents, and then the team went about building it.
Great. So it's not a instantaneous process, but you guys have done games before, obviously. Was this similarly? Did it take about the usual amount of time? A little less, a little more?
Well, it took us a little longer this time because we were working with primary sources, and we had to figure out a way to make documents come to life and to be engaging for students. So we did a lot of iterative testing that Talus can talk to you about. And we worked with faculty at RIT, where they've got a great game design program, to help with the actual design. And then we worked with subject matter experts and historians from around the country to bring the different components to life. So it was a labor of love, and we're really thankful to the Library of Congress for all their support.
Great, thank you. Back to the classroom. Who's next?
What languages did you use to design the game?
Ian, I think that's you.
Yeah, I'll take this one. The whole application is written in JavaScript, and it's built on a Node.js backend, which is sort of a JavaScript server where you can send requests and communicate with databases. Yeah, JavaScript web application. Short.
Yeah, so Ian, have you been doing that your whole life since you were 2 years old, or was that something you picked up in school or more recently?
I had an interest in it when I was around all of your age, but I didn't really focus in on it until I went to college for it at RIT.
Cool. And is that your main kind of programming language that you're an expert in, or do you know others as well?
JavaScript is certainly what I've used the most at Second Avenue, though I've used a substantial amount of C# as well, mostly through Unity, which is a popular free engine for game development.
Great. I think this class asked that question because this is a computer science class. Is that right, guys?
Yes, it's a computer science class.
Yeah. Okay, great. Next question.
Trey?
Currently, we're learning Python, so I just wanted to know how close are Python and JavaScript?
They have their similarities. They have their differences. Python tends to be, you don't have to be, it's kind of, when you write in Python, it's kind of like speaking a conversation to a computer, whereas JavaScript is a little more syntax, where you're kind of speaking more in computer language than a little less conversational. They are both good entry programming languages to learn that get used all over the place. And learning a specific language, if you learn one language, you'll find as you learn other languages that a lot of the concepts that you learned in one start applying to others.
Great, thank you. Another question from the students.
Why y'all develop this type of game?
Alice, do you want to take that one?
So when we got this grant from the Library of Congress, which is part of their civics and participation grant, so it's all focused on analyzing primary sources, and it's focused on, we chose the topic of suffrage and the suffrage movement, partially because Rochester is so, entrenched in suffrage history. There's so much going on. Between Susan B. Anthony's history, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, they're all very close to the Rochester area. So there's a lot of local history here and in the area. So we chose suffrage. And then we wanted to make a game because we wanted to make analyzing primary sources and making decisions based on primary sources, something that was more fun and could be more collaborative than, just doing a DBQ essay or, reading a textbook or something like that. So we wanted to make something that would be more fun and more engaging, but still, teach some of the tools for analyzing primary sources and learning history firsthand.
Yeah, I want to give credit to the Library of Congress for their grants program that the Library of Congress has unlimited resources for materials that are historical in nature. And they're sitting there, and this grants program asked our developers to come up with ways to make those materials more accessible and usable and able to be delivered to teach history. So this game is a result of that effort. Really, really cool. Anybody else want to chime in from the Second Avenue team about the social significance of telling this story 100 years later, yet the themes are all still relevant to today and to the movements we're seeing, both for women and equal pay and for other movements that we see. Anybody want to kind of speak to that historical relevance plus modern relevance?
Absolutely. So we just had the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and unfortunately, a lot of the celebrations got canceled because of COVID. But the suffrage movement and the abolition movement grew up alongside each other, and many of the suffragists were also abolitionists. And the suffragists got to see and develop indirect power skills because they couldn't vote and they really didn't have a voice in politics. And they had to convince a whole group of people all across the nation that it was in their best interest to give women that right to vote. And so many of the ways of organizing, communicating, demonstrating that were used in both the abolition movement and the suffrage movement have ended up influencing the way civil rights movements are still happening today. And there was a big schism right around the time of the end of the Civil War because the women really wanted their right to vote to be granted at the same time that Black males were given the right to vote, and that didn't happen. But then they ended up making up, and they kept moving forward, and it took 3 generations for that change to occur. And so very often people think like 1848, Seneca Falls, bing, women have suffrage, but it took over 72 years for that to actually happen. And so there was, generational transfer. They used media in really innovative ways. I like to joke that they had Twitter before Twitter because at one of the conventions, they had women from all over the United States send postcards to the convention saying why they needed the right to vote. And it was really amazing. And those are housed here actually in the Susan B. Anthony House. So, it's an incredible template for how to organize and how to be a progenitor of change.
Great. Thank you, Tori. Okay, back to the classroom for another question.
I got a question. How did you get your current job?
How did you get your current job?
Yeah.
Susan, do you want to take that one? You haven't said much, or Sven?
Sure. So how I got my current job, my case is I was straight out of college and I was looking for a part-time job at the time. So at that point, I looked for it and I knew Tori and she was able to bring me on part-time. And then I clicked with the company and I've been here for 11 years. So that's how I got ours. I think you can all do a round robin on this one.
Susan?
Sure. I started off doing graphic design in a company that did corporate branding, and that was interesting and challenging, but I decided to join Second Avenue so that I could work on more educational type design, and it's been very fulfilling. I knew Tori, we actually knew each other from a college days connection, and I met her and I started doing consulting work for Second Avenue, and then I finally got to work full time for Second Avenue.
Alice.
All right.
So I graduated from University of Rochester close to 2 years ago now, and I started working here right after. And I met Tori through an event at the Strong Museum of Play. I interned there for a summer after my junior year of college. So I interned there and I worked on their Women in Games exhibition. And Tori came to speak at an event that I was at, so I met her through that. And I actually joined to first start working on this project. I had some relevant experience at University of Rochester working on the Seward Family Digital Archives, which is a digital history manuscript project. So I worked on that, and then I had worked at the museum. So everything just kind of fell together, and now I've been here for almost 2 years, and it's been great.
I was just finishing college at RIT about 7 years ago, and a friend of mine from college was currently working here and told me that the project they were working on required a lot more manpower than they currently had. So I applied and have been here ever since.
And I'm lucky to have an absolutely amazing team.
Yeah, Tori, just quickly, like, you know, back when you started, it was you and another team member or two, and now you've built this team that can bring all these different skills together. How did you do that very quickly?
Oh my gosh. Well, we started out with art and design and QA and me. I did learning design. I also did like the financials. I unloaded the dishwasher. I did all the fun stuff. And over time, we've grown. And we've done that by doing work for ourselves through great grant programs like the SBIR program that Ed runs, as well as some stuff for the NSF, as well as clients. And so over that time, we've built processes and ways of designing and developing educational games, simulations, and all sorts of other stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. And we have team members. We're located in Rochester, but we have team members based in Florida, Nevada, and Pennsylvania that also work for Second Avenue. So we're growing, and we always like to hire local talent, guys. So get your computer science degrees and call me up.
Cool. Okay, we have time for one more question. I was hoping the group here could kind of ask a question. You guys played the game, I think earlier today or yesterday. Do you have any questions about the gameplay and user experience before we sign off?
How do you get feedback?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll start, and then maybe Talus or Sven can finish. So we always get end user feedback throughout the design. So we will typically do some design comps and show them to people and get feedback on them. And Ed knows that I'm a champion of the Art Slam, which we can talk about another day. And then we did a first round of design work with Professor Jacobs from RIT. And we played it on a whiteboard for a while before we actually started doing a design document. And then from the design, we sent the design document out to a bunch of subject matter experts to get their opinion on the design of both the interactive, the guided tours, as well as the game. And then we go on to this really cool thing called paper prototyping. And that's where Talus can pick up the conversation because she actually ran the paper prototyping with groups of students.
Yeah, so the idea behind paper prototyping, and you got some of this information in the video that we created, but is that if you're going to make any big changes to the design or the way that you play, it's way easier to do it before you start developing it. If we start developing something and then we have to change something, our art and development team are unhappy with us because now they have to go back and change a bunch of stuff that they've already been working on. So it's best to make those changes before you actually start designing it. So what we did was we came up with, it was mostly tables and text boxes and everything that we created just in Word. And we printed it out and cut everything up, and then we gave pieces to the players to play with. And part of that is running them through it, you know, so I acted as the computer. So when they wanted to, you know, click on this piece, then I would give them the piece that would show up. And basically that allowed them to play through the game experience and see if there were any major hitches in the way that they were playing or anything that they wish they could do that they couldn't. So that's kind of how we got feedback as we went through the game.
And then once you have an early build, it's a great idea to bring people in to test again. And we like to test early and often throughout the design. And in this particular case, like, we had to make sure that we were working with primary sources. So the kinds of mechanics that we could use were very limited compared to some of the other games that we've done in the past. So, you know, and Professor Jacobs talked a little bit about how having constraints helps with game design. In this case, it really had to be the centerpiece of the design.
Great. Well, that just about wraps it up. I want to kind of give it back to Tori to finish it up and talk about just the field of education learning games as being an opportunity to present socially significant topics that are then engaging to students. Tori, do you have any thoughts on where the field's going to go next with these types of games?
Well, when I started making games in education, we couldn't call them games. We had to call them simulations or interactives because talking about playing a game was really not taken seriously in the world of education. And I think now everybody's sort of caught up to the idea that games can be incredibly engaging, fun, and a great way to learn. They're also a really amazing, safe place to discuss challenging issues, right? And you can use a game to confront topics like poverty or race or the struggle for suffrage or the civil rights movement in a way that you can't do in just regular conversation. And so they can be a way to bring you into a topic, to get to explore it more deeply, and do it in a way where you're not afraid of, you know, saying the wrong thing, and at the same time learning a lot of history that you might not have learned otherwise. And there's a big movement around games that teach and games that tackle things that are important. So there are games that there's a conference called Games for Change, and there's a whole movement behind designing games that will help improve our society. Like, one was about how it's really important for restaurant workers to have time off so they don't come to work sick. There have been other ones that have, you know, we're working on one right now that's amazing because we're helping to preserve the Oneida language. And so when you think about different things that you want to learn and maybe things that would be difficult to teach in other ways, it's a wonderful way to engage students and to get into topics and bring things to life that doesn't really happen in a textbook or a lecture.
Great. Well, that was a wonderful way to cap this off. To the students out there, the ball's in your court to sort of create the next generation of learning games. It was so great to meet you, to the team at Second Avenue Learning. Thanks again. And to everybody out there, we'll see you next time.
Bye.